Hello and welcome to Use Power Automate with Finance and Operations. My name is Dag Calafell. I am a director at MCA Connect, and I'm here to show you how to become a superhero, knowing how to connect Power Automate to your finance and operations environment. What if you could be that purchasing agent who receives a notification on his phone whenever a purchase order is approved that you want to place immediately? What if you can enable your C-suite to approve workflows via their phone and not have to go into finance and operations at all? What if you, as a plant manager, could get a notification on your phone when you receive material so that you can expedite that to the correct work center and get the output immediately to the customer that needs it the most? What if, as a collection agent, you could track all write-offs automatically in an Excel file on SharePoint Online? That's what we're here for today. I want to turn all of us into superheroes. Our agenda is really, how do we connect Power Automate with finance and operations, specifically the business events that were made available about a year and a half ago. First, let's explore a little bit about what is Power Automate. Our session today is not going to be in depth on Power Automate, but we will talk about how do you connect it to finance and operations. So overall, Power Automate is an automation tool. It is a workflow tool and a notification tool. You should essentially be automating anything that is repetitive and focusing in on your value-added activities. Power Automate itself does not require developer skills. You can see in the upper right-hand corner that there are many connectors available for Power Automate. So you can connect this tool, this workflow tool, to a lot of the applications and services that you already use today. It is, however, very good if you happen to be tech savvy, and especially too if you're comfortable writing macros or doing formulas in Excel like VLOOKUP, because you'll make the transition to Power Automate fairly easily. There are thousands of templates. A lot of them come from Microsoft and some of them come from the community. So I encourage you to explore those. And as you can see on the right, Power Automate is very much a visual designer tool. You're able to accomplish a lot with very little technical expertise. So let's get going into a template demonstration already. We're going to set up a push notification whenever my boss sends me an email. So first I'm going to jump into flow.microsoft.com. And after I sign in, it will take me to the Power Automate homepage. And here I'm going to search for email from your boss, and that will bring up the template that we want to use for this demonstration. And like I said, there are thousands of templates. So as you think of something that you do repetitive, like just go in here, search for it, see if there's something already available. And if not, maybe that's something that you're willing to create on your own. Click on Get a Push Notification when you receive an email from your boss. And the first thing that will pop up are the connectors that it's going to use and a little visual of how that flow will operate. And you can see here, it's already connected to my demo account, which is the account I'm logged in with right now. And it's also going to enable me to use this connector called notifications. As I click Create Flow, it's going to spin up that workflow for me and take me to that particular page. And on this page, you can see some details or notes that you may put in here about what the flow does, some status information on the right, the connections on the right as well. Make sure that they all have that green checkbox. And then a 28-day run history. Whenever you have an issue, this is a good place to look. Let me go ahead and click on this edit button. This is taking me to the details about how this flow operates. The first thing you'll notice is at a high level, it's really kind of like a diagram. At first, whenever I receive an email, then go ahead and get my profile information from Active Directory, get who I report to, and then I have here a conditional of whether or not that email came from my manager, and if so, then send a push notification. Diving in a little bit deeper, each one of these connections and actions require some parameters to them, some settings. This on a new email is going to operate only on my inbox. There is, get my profile. It has no parameters. Get my manager. It's taking my user ID from the prior connection and providing that as the input to this operation here. As you can see, it's very visual. So if I wanted to add yet another option here, perhaps I want to also receive the notification whenever my boss was copied on an email sent to me. That probably means that it's important and that he or she is going to watch to make sure I answer and has a vested interest in that answer. So I can come in here, I can do a drop down, I can search for CC, or yep, there it is. And you can tell from the section here that the results as I searched are based on what action above has that variable or that information, that data that I want to pull in. So here I'll choose CC, and I want to, maybe I'll use contains and then put in my email address. Or actually, I'm putting in my manager's email address. Sorry about that. And right now it's an and, so I want it to be an or. And finally, what kind of notification will I receive on my phone? Right now it says boss said, and then the subject, and has a link to go to Outlook. We may say important email or something along those lines. You can tell that as I'm clicking in here, I'm able to add additional information very easily, pull in new things. There's also a way to provide, as I mentioned, Excel type formulas. So that's what this expression editor is for. Essentially concludes this brief introduction into Power Automate. What I want to do, what I really am excited about doing, is getting you into connecting finance and operations with Power Automate to unlock the ability to provide much better service to your customers, to your internal customers, your other employees, your boss, whoever it is that you're interested in giving better service to, or just immediately emailing upon a certain event occurring. So with that, I want to encourage you to, one more time, to look at those templates. Maybe you want a push notification if there's rain in the forecast today, so that you bring your umbrella. Maybe you want to review docs and see what updates might be relevant to you, and then get a summary email or send a message into Teams. There's a lot of possibilities with this tool. Don't think that finance and operations is the only thing. As you connect it to finance and operations, then you'll be able to route that data into a lot of other services, a lot of other notification options or tracking options, Excel files, SQL Server. The possibilities are endless here. Out of the box come several Dynamics connectors. Business Central has an online and an on-prem connector. The Common Data Service has connectors for entities and actions there. Sales has connectors, as well as finance and operations. So as you go through these slides with me together today, just consider how you can also connect these to the other apps that you have running in the Dynamics umbrella. Some interesting finance and operations templates that are out there for you today. Sending an email when a business event occurs in finance and operations, completing a workflow from finance and operations, but using your cell phone, getting records from finance and operations and saving them in an on-prem SQL server. And finally, you can use this for interfaces as well. Copy Salesforce accounts into Dynamics customers directly. Other dynamic apps templates that you can find out there: automatically creating leads based on tweets, notifying your team about new opportunities as they are entered into sales, creating a new record based on Microsoft form submissions. And when I think of that, I think of any type of survey that you want to do, or if you have an internal form that then gets routed around, there's no reason why that couldn't be a Microsoft form that then creates a record in one of the Dynamics apps. Similarly here, sending a survey when a case is resolved in Dynamics 365, or even receiving a weekly email summary of all the opportunities and where they stand, what their status is. Diving deeper into finance and operations. This is what is available to you without any effort. The options here are in two categories, really. One is triggers that will cause a flow to begin automatically. And then there are actions, which are those steps or operations that you take within a flow to gather more data or to update a record, that sort of thing. So on the left here, as a trigger, we have whenever a business event occurs. This is actually very flexible. I'll show you in a moment. And on the right side, you can tell that there's create, delete. You can execute actions. You can get information and update information as well. I've already alluded to this thing called business events. What is it? It's not a mixer done on Friday nights, I'll tell you that. Business events are small pieces of data sent between two systems. Essentially, it occurs when an action occurs within finance and operations. These little events, they're intentionally small. The important piece about them is that because they happen during product posting or during, a journal posting, they need to be small just to enable performance to not be affected. But what's great is that they can be customized, and the smart thing about them too is that once you know that something has occurred, then that can trigger a whole bunch of logic that may gather data from more than one system, package it together, send an email, or copy that into an Excel spreadsheet for you to reference later, that sort of thing. Out of the box, there are a lot of business events: purchase orders, confirmation, receipt, invoice and payment, sales order invoice, free text invoice. Enterprise asset management has a bunch of them. I don't have everything listed here. And collections has a lot of business events as well. Setting aside all of those application events, we also have workflows and alerts. And workflows, I'm sure you're familiar with them. There are a lot of places in this system that workflows can be started, and they're very, very configurable. And they will also kick off a business event so you can take action outside of finance and operations in addition to inside of it. Same thing with alerts. And we're going to dive into both of those in a little bit. All of the out-of-the-box business events you'll find in this business events catalog. And you can just search for it at the top, or you can go into system administration setup. But either way, what you see is a list of business events, including their category and a description of when they fire. And on the right-hand side, you'll see some data, what kind of pieces of information are available to you when that business event gets fired. And then across the top are some important tabs for you to see what might be going on with a business event you've already subscribed to, if there are any errors. You can also see how many people have signed up to the same one, if you need to manage anything from that aspect. We'll jump into this in a moment too. Workflow events are kind of complex, just like workflow in general is kind of complex. However, though, the important one you really need to know out of this entire slide is the workflow work item in the lower right-hand corner. Whenever an approval item is assigned to a user, that is the workflow event that will be fired, and that's the one that you would be able to subscribe to. Unless you want to just know that there is a workflow that got started, then you may want to look at workflow type. I have this here more for your reference. This is also available in Docs. Hopefully you're already aware that in most of the pages of finance and operations, you can click on the options tab in the action pane and then click on create custom alert. And that will enable you to get a notification whenever a record is created or deleted or a particular field is changed. And business events have hooked into this as well. So you can create an alert rule, and as long as it's not organization wide and send externally is turned to on, that will fire a business event that then you can take action with in Power Automate. Why would this be important? The idea here is that instead of receiving a notification inside of finance and operations, there may be users who only have need to go in once or twice a day and do not have finance and operations open all the time. And for those users, they would receive those alerts perhaps even the next day that something occurred. Instead, with this alert rule business event, we're able to kick off a flow that flow has the ability to do any number of things and notify people, even notify people who are not the creator of the alert rule, for example, or even just little notifications like, hey, just noticed that the terms of payment was changed on your customer. You may want to check in with them. And that could be an email that would go to a salesman. There's a lot of flexibility once you get it into Power Automate. Let me paint a picture here with a use case, and then let's go and do it together. So the background here is that my company, we provide rebates to customers quarterly based on the sales that we had with that customer. These credit memos are issued in the free text invoice page in Finance and Operations. And as a customer service representative, I feel like the rebates that we give are so nice, and it's a great time to check in with the customer, let them know about new incentives that we have, ask them how their business is doing. Do they expect an increase in business? Are they expecting a decrease in business, and why? And talk about any other new products that have come out. And in the past, I had mentioned I started in AX40. So in the past, I remember having to put in an extension request, waiting for a month for it to get developed after it was approved and prioritized. And then we would get an email, but then it would be hard to modify the email or modify who receives the email. And instead, in this new cloud world, Finance and Operations gives us the ability to get that data into Power Automate, and then we're able to have full control over what happens with it. Let's do that now. First, I'm going to go into Finance and Operations, and let's look at the business events catalog together. Going into System Administration, Setup, Business Events Catalog. Here I can see all of the business events I have. I'm looking for free text invoice 1. I happen to know it's in the list here towards the top. And I'm going to get invoice account, invoice ID, invoice date, including the due date, legal entity, control number. So this looks like the one I want. So I'm going to go back into Flow, and I'm going to start a new flow from scratch. You could actually start with a template, but we'll go with the from scratch. And it's going to be an automated flow because it's going to be triggered by Finance and Operations. So I'll click on that. Under triggers, this is an important thing I failed to mention before. In Power Automate, Finance and Operations is called Fin and Ops. So that's what I'm going to look for. Just as I had mentioned before, there's only one trigger for Finance and Operations. So you'll find there's only one entry listed here. I will click on that. I'll make a name for my flow later. So I'm going to click on Create. It will now ask me for what environment I am in, the category, and then the business event. So I'm going to actually type in my instance here because I have probably 200 in this list. Now I need to know the category and the business event. So flipping back here, I can see that my category is accounts receivable, and my business event is going to be free text invoice posted. So back over here, accounts receivable, drop down here, free text invoice posted. And now I have the option of providing a legal entity or leaving it empty. If I leave it empty, I'm going to receive a business event whenever that happens in any of the legal entities in Finance and Operations, or I can be specific and actually specify which one I want to receive or subscribe to. So now I have that here. One best practice with Power Automate is to rename the steps because you may end up with multiple that have the same name, and then it starts to get confusing. So I'm going to rename this one to when a free text, or actually when a credit is posted. And what am I going to do with that? First thing I need to do is this action called Parse JSON. Parse JSON is going to take the information that finance and operations gives me and turn it into variables here on the right that then I can select in future actions. So here we have the body, and then it's asking me for this thing called a schema. I'm going to generate that from a sample. And as I go back here, there's a little download button here, and that will give me an example payload. It isn't actually the schema itself, it's an example payload. Keep that in mind. And all I did was copy and paste it into this window. Before I move on, there's one thing that I like to do at this point, and that is I've seen issues in Power Automate using this particular function. If I don't add 1 cent to any of the currency fields, then I may end up with an invalid error, and it can be a little bit annoying and frustrating to figure out what the actual error is. So you can see in the invoice amount, I've added 1 cent, and then I'm going to scroll over. There's one more invoice tax amount. I've added 1 cent. And when I hit done, Power Automate has converted that into this little JSON schema. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So if you do want to impress your friends, and then you can just tell them, hey, get that JavaScript object notation. Again, I want to rename that. So I'm going to parse the business event payload for data. Data sounds better. And for now, I'm just going to hit save. I want to show you what this looks like, and then we can come back and run it again. It'll show you how I troubleshoot a little bit. So when I hit save, there's something that Power Automate did for me automatically, and that is it told finance and operations, hey, I want to know whenever you post a free text invoice in company USMF. And I can double check that by clicking on this active events. And I have here a flow endpoint is what it's called. So this is actually connected to my other tab in Power Automate. So I know that those two systems are talking to each other. Now I'm going to go into my free text invoices under accounts receivable invoices, all free text invoices, and create a credit for my customer. So retail Los Angeles, congratulations. Normally an admin or another person would be in here filling this out. This isn't really part of what in my scenario, the customer service representative would do. And we'll leave it at quantity 1, but we're going to give them a $43,000 and 567. So there we have it. I'm going to click post. Okay. So what's happening now is this credit is being posted to the general ledger. And also it happened very quickly. It has actually kicked off my Power Automate flow, and that has run. So I went back to the homepage for the flow, and you can see the run history has something here already. 10 seconds ago, it executed. And as I open up each one of these, they've changed. I'm now in my history view, so I see a lot of information about what has happened. You can see the instance I was talking to. You can see the actual data returned. And these green check marks mean that everything went okay. Here, it parsed the data into variables. And yeah, so now I want to go ahead and click on edit. I'll show you a few more tricks here. The first step is going to be email. So you saw I clicked plus, I searched for email. There are a lot of email connectors. This one that's just called mail is the one that comes out of the box. So I'm going to click on that one. You may need to accept a privacy policy. And then I'm going to email D365FO demo. And then I can provide a subject of invoice ID posted So in addition to the email, which is great because I'll see it when I get to my desk, maybe I also want that notification. So on top of that, after the email gets sent, I'm going to choose on notifications, and I want a mobile notification. With these mobile notifications, really you need to have the Flow app installed on your phone. But once you do, then it will enable you to receive those notifications. And again, I can say invoice number posted for, and then the account. And I can put a lot more detail in here. I can include a link to finance and operations specifically. And there's a way to do some deep links in here, but that's beyond our scope for today. And that's it. That's all I needed to do in order to receive a notification whenever a credit is posted for my customer. I did have a couple of notes in here, wanted to include these in the slides. Remember that you need to add a cent or modify the schema from integer to number. That's pro tip number 1. Pro tip number 2 is that because business events are lightweight, you may have to have an additional step here to get more information. So in this case, I wanted to get more information about the customer, perhaps which salesman is assigned to this customer. And here's an example of how to get that additional data. You need to, again, specify the instance or the environment. You choose on the entity name. This matches the list of entity names that you'll see in the data management in finance and operations. And then with a crystal ball, you have to figure out what object ID you have to specify here. The best way to do that is by asking a developer. And the second best way to do that is by going to this metadata address and then searching for the information within that metadata file. And this, unfortunately, this metadata it includes every single data entity. So it is quite large and you can get lost in there. That's why I say asking a developer might be the fastest way to know what to do. Another little pro tip is that business events formats dates in a Microsoft JSON format. It doesn't conform to ISO 8601. So there's a set of formulas you need to use in order to get the actual date and time. And I know that they are available to you. If you were to just search on Bing, you would find those formulas, but here they are also in the presentation for you. A challenge for you is share the knowledge, right? Get some practice, become Superman, and then turn around and make a couple more Supermans and get the word out, because business events are here, they're awesome, and everyone should be using them. Here's another example. We don't have time to go through today. When a vendor is created, you can, based on what kind of rule it is, send up notifications. A good example here is if you had one department creating a vendor and then another department needs to continue to fill it out or maybe negotiate terms with the vendor, then providing notifications or even using Power Automate's workflow capability outside of finance and operations gives you more flexibility and ensures that there isn't a vendor that is set up but never was called to negotiate better terms. I had mentioned briefly that Power Automate or Logic Apps can be used as an integration or interface tool. So I wanted to throw this out here. There's a use case that I've seen before. A large manufacturer distributor sells industrial equipment, and that typical invoice exceeds $300,000. So it's important that the customers are paying on time and that there isn't too much credit afforded to the customers who may have millions and millions of dollars outstanding. So the requirement is to integrate with Dun & Bradstreet to get more information about the companies. Give us the latest information based on the latest filings. Whenever a sales order is submitted for a credit check, F&O would then access data from dnb.com. A developer would have to get involved here because a custom business event would be fired that would cause Power Automate to retrieve that credit worthiness information and push that back into finance and operations so it's available for the credit and collections department. Additionally, if we wanted to, once that data is in Power Automate, it makes things very easy to add an action after sending it to finance and operations to check for whether or not the customer is past due or whether or not the customer has some sort of hold outstanding, and then send an appropriate notification or an email, or even set that customer on hold in the customer master. All right. It was a pleasure today talking to you about business events and Power Automate. I hope that you do follow me, connect with the community. I appreciate DynamicsCon for inviting me to talk here, and I appreciate everyone.